I shall be discussing what are the parameters to be monitored during home isolation and what are the treatments that are found to be useful in mild patients. Please note that my entire focus shall be on patients who are having a mild disease. Some of these treatments may be useful in patients with severe disease, but not in those with mild disease. So, during home monitoring, what is critical to understand is that hypoxia is the key feature of severe COVID-19, and this may be clinically silent, the so-called happy hypoxia. This is due to normal lung compliance. Therefore, the patient does not perceive the hypoxia, at least initially, and may be related to bronchopulmonary collaterals, which bypass the lungs. So the thing about happy hypoxia is, unless you look for it, you're never going to find it. Therefore, saturation of oxygen using a pulse oximeter should be regularly monitored during home isolation. And as Dr. Anshul has already emphasized, any drop in oxygen saturation less than or equal to 94% should warrant urgent hospitalization. Please note that the barrier is 94%. Anything that is less than 94 requires hospitalization and institution of certain other therapies, and oxygen needs to be given to such patients. With respect to pharmacotherapy for mild COVID, various drugs are used and guidelines recommend use of different drugs: ivermectin, doxycycline, azithromycin, zinc, to vitamin C, vitamin D. Emerging evidence suggests some role for budesonide inhalation and nitroglycerin spray, inhaled nitric oxide spray. We shall look at the evidence base for each of these. With respect to ivermectin and doxycycline, there was this recent scoping review that was published, and I have taken these slides from that. As one can see, the evidence to support ivermectin monotherapy as opposed to a comparator is sparse. Few studies have looked at mortality and found some marginal benefit. Few studies have looked at survival without ICU transfer and found that there may be some benefit, but most of the studies are equivocal. Similarly, with respect to doxycycline, most of the studies did not have a comparator group. So a proportion of patients did show a benefit, but it's very difficult to reach a conclusion without a comparator group. Ivermectin doxycycline combination, limited evidence suggests that it may improve clinical situation in patients with mild COVID, but again, the evidence is sparse. And comparing ivermectin monotherapy with ivermectin doxycycline combination or placebo, again, the number of days of hospitalization could possibly have been reduced by ivermectin, but again, this was comparable to placebo. So it's very difficult to reach a meaningful conclusion. The mean duration of viral clearance was better with ivermectin, but what is the relevance of that is difficult to comment upon. So the evidence base is sparse, and as you can see, this circle at the top right of each of these slides, the color of this circle indicates the relative safety of these therapies. It's not related to the efficacy or effectiveness. This may not really benefit always, but at least there is not much of a safety signal. With respect to azithromycin, again, this was a systematic review which did a grade methodology to assess the evidence for reduction of all-cause mortality, invasive mechanical ventilation, respiratory failure. The certainty of the evidence was low to very low for length of hospital stay. And again, benefits are marginal. However, isolated azithromycin may not have much safety issues, and it is recommended in some of the protocols. Vitamin D, the use of vitamin D has been extrapolated from the fact that use of vitamin D reduces the number of acute respiratory infections in general, not COVID-19. And this systematic review has pulled the data from different trials, wherein overall possibly 8% decreased odds of acute respiratory infection, which was statistically significant, has been observed in those receiving vitamin D. and the data for these studies was relatively homogeneous. There was little heterogeneity. And again, on the other secondary outcomes, there was not much of an impact on the individual upper or lower respiratory infections and other outcomes. So vitamin D evidence for use in COVID is low. However, it has been shown that COVID positive patients tend to have lower vitamin D levels than COVID negative patients. This is another systematic review which looks at the standardized mean difference in vitamin D levels between COVID positive and COVID negative. And as you can see that there is definitely a lower vitamin D level in those who are COVID positive. However, the individual studies were quite heterogeneous, and various different disease states have also found this finding of reduced vitamin D levels. So whether this is an epiphenomenon or really something related to COVID-19 is difficult to judge. Vitamin C again has been used in ICU settings as well as in patients with upper respiratory infections. There is little data to support its use in COVID-19, and the use has been extrapolated from experience with other respiratory illnesses, wherein some studies might have found some marginal benefits. Hydroxychloroquine is a very interesting drug. This is a drug that we use day in, day out. And if you look at the initial discourse, it was touted as a miracle drug. And then certain studies came in which suggested that hydroxychloroquine is deadly. And now, finally, we have probably reached at the conclusion that it is not effective, but not necessarily it's deadly, and neither is it a miracle drug. The studies that showed increased mortality risk in patients receiving hydroxychloroquine in COVID-19 were retracted due to lack of data and possibly fraudulent approaches with undeclared conflicts of interest amongst the investigators. Personally, we have used hydroxychloroquine in thousands of patients in our clinical practice, and we have hardly ever encountered cardiotoxicity. So it was very surprising to come across this study published in the Lancet, which looked at risk of hydroxychloroquine alone or in combination with azithromycin for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, wherein they have purported that nearly more than 200,000 patients have been studied. It is very difficult to take cognizance of this data when hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin is hardly ever used in patients with rheumatoid arthritis. So I don't know why there is so much negative press about hydroxychloroquine, but probably it does not benefit much for COVID-19, but I would be skeptical about the advertised safety issues. In fact, hydroxychloroquine has been shown to improve cardiovascular risk factors, including the risk of reducing the risk of incident diabetes in patients with rheumatic diseases and also in settings outside rheumatic disease. So anyways, for the purpose of mild COVID-19, it is best to avoid hydroxychloroquine, but I would be skeptical about its safety issues. A recent trial from the UK evaluated inhaled budesonide in 73 patients allocated to usual care and 73 allocated to budesonide. They were all patients with mild COVID, and they used budesonide at a dose of 800 microgram twice a day. And in the intention to treat population, they found a reduced risk of progression to severe COVID, and so also in the per protocol population, and the effect size was quite large. So the number of needed to treat with inhaled budesonide to reduce hospitalization related to urgent care was 8. So there is quite a bit of preliminary evidence that suggests that inhaled budesonide may prevent progression to severe COVID. The basis of this study was that they initially found that patients like those who have chronic obstructive airway disease who are on inhaled corticosteroids tend to have better outcomes when they develop COVID-19. So they thought that could it be due to inhaled corticosteroids that these patients are on. This evidence is emerging, and it is something I would watch with keen interest. If other studies prove this, this could be a very useful measure that is relatively cheap. Another recent development was a nitric oxide spray, wherein this is not yet published. This is just a press release, wherein use of this nitric oxide spray in 79 confirmed cases markedly reduced viral load. Whether this translates into clinical benefits needs to be seen. I would wait for the full peer-reviewed study before I reach definitive conclusions. Favipiravir is another drug that is often used by practitioners. I would like to remind people that the evidence for the use of favipiravir initially came from a journal that was called as Engineering, and it mainly used surrogate outcomes like decreased viral load. And what is important to understand is favipiravir can have unwanted side effects like a high pill burden. There is severe gastrointestinal disturbance, at least in some patients. Patients can develop hyperkalemia even without renal failure, possibly due to tubular dysfunction, and also it can cause renal failure. So I would personally not recommend the use of favipiravir. Role of corticosteroids. If you note, I have put a red circle here. Why? For home isolation patients, corticosteroids should not be used routinely. It is only for patients with hypoxia. In fact, evidence suggests that corticosteroid use in mild cases might actually increase the risk of mortality. This was the dexamethasone in hospitalized patients with COVID-19 from the recovery trial in the UK. And if you look at it, the incidence of death was lower than in the usual care group amongst those receiving invasive mechanical ventilation or those receiving oxygen, but not in those receiving no respiratory supported randomization. In fact, the rate ratio was tending to be greater than 1.19, with a lower limit of 0.92 and an upper limit of 1.55, suggesting that potentially use of corticosteroid in mild cases might actually increase the risk of mortality. So it is not to be used in mild cases, it is to be used in severe cases who develop hypoxia only. So to conclude, medicines may be prescribed as per protocols decided by regulatory authorities like the ICMR guidelines from time to time. However, the evidence base is scarce. Inhaled budesonide holds promise for preventing progression to severe COVID-19. Systemic corticosteroids are useful only in hypoxemic patients, and it is critical to monitor oxygen saturation. Anything less than 94% should warrant urgent hospitalization, initiation of corticosteroids, and oxygen therapy. Thank you.